August 17, 1943, Messina, Sicily. British Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery's staff car rolled into the captured port city, expecting a hero's welcome. His 8th Army had fought the Germans for weeks along Sicily's eastern coast. The city was theirs by right of the hardest fighting. Montgomery stepped out, ready to accept the surrender of Sicily's crown jewel. Then he saw the American flag already flying over the city hall, and leaning against a command car, smoking a cigar with a satisfied grin, was General George S. Patton. "Good morning, Monty," Patton drawled. "Lovely day for a stroll, isn't it? We've been here since yesterday. Thought you might need directions." Montgomery's face turned the color of a British telephone box. His jaw clenched. His carefully cultivated composure cracked like artillery-shattered concrete. The American cowboy he'd dismissed as reckless and undisciplined had just beaten him to the most important objective in Sicily. And Patton had made damn sure the photographers captured every moment. In that instant, Montgomery realized he'd made a catastrophic miscalculation. This wasn't a subordinate who would follow British leadership. This was a competitor who intended to win. And the humiliation had only just begun. The rivalry between Bernard Law Montgomery and George Smith Patton was inevitable from the moment they met. Everything about them clashed. Montgomery was the son of an Anglican bishop, raised on discipline and Methodist certainty. Patton was California aristocracy who believed in reincarnation and claimed he'd fought in ancient battles. Montgomery planned every operation with meticulous detail, building overwhelming force before attacking. Patton believed in speed, shock, and hitting the enemy before they were ready. Montgomery had defeated Rommel at El Alamein in November 1942, earning him legendary status in Britain. He saw himself as the natural commander of Allied ground forces in Europe. Patton had taken over the demoralized the Second Corps after Kasserine Pass and turned them into fighters. He believed American arms were equal or superior to any army on Earth. When planning began for Operation Huskatha invasion of Sicily, Montgomery assumed operational command. The British would take the main route along the eastern coast toward Messina, while Patton's 7th Army protected Montgomery's western flank. It was a supporting role. Secondary importance, Montgomery expected the Americans to accept this gracefully, learn from British experience, and follow the plan. He had no idea what was coming. Patton sat in his headquarters reviewing Montgomery's plan and felt rage building in his chest like steam in a boiler. A supporting role, flank protection, like he was some second-rate formation that couldn't be trusted with real objectives. He'd spent his entire life preparing to command armies in combat, and now a British field marshal wanted him to play rear guard. "They want me to hold Monty's coat while he fights the war," Patton told his staff. His voice was acid. "That son of a bitch thinks Americans can't fight. I'm going to show him different." Patton complained to Eisenhower. He argued with planners. He made his fury known to anyone with ears. Montgomery was shocked. In his experience, subordinate generals accepted their roles and executed orders. This American was questioning strategic decisions made by officers with far more combat experience. Montgomery told colleagues that Patton lacked the maturity for high command. The American would learn his place soon enough. He was catastrophically wrong. The invasion of Sicily began on July 10, 1943. Montgomery's 8th Army pushed north along the eastern coast, running into determined German resistance. The terrain favored defense narrow roads, mountainous country, excellent observation. Progress was measured in yards. Meanwhile, Patton's 7th Army advanced through the western sector with minimal opposition. Montgomery's plan had Patton moving slowly in support, waiting for the 8th Army's main effort to succeed. But Patton saw opportunity where others saw limitation. While Montgomery ground forward against German defenses, western Sicily lay virtually undefended, and sitting at the end of those western roads was Palermo, the island's capital. On July 18th, Patton launched a provisional corps westward without clearing it with higher command. Certainly without consulting Montgomery, American forces covered over 100 miles in 4 days, seized Palermo on July 22nd, and Patton triumphantly announced the capture to the world press. Montgomery learned about Palermo's fall from a British reporter. He was livid. "This wasn't in the bloody plan," he told his staff. "What does that cowboy think he's doing?" What Patton was doing was demonstrating American operational capability. While Montgomery's careful advance bogged down, the Americans had captured Sicily's largest city in a lightning campaign. The press loved it. Headlines celebrated American dash and initiative. Montgomery's methodical progress looked ponderous by comparison. German commanders noticed too. Intercepts revealed they now considered Patton dangerous and unpredictable. They had to worry about multiple axes of advance instead of just Montgomery's single thrust. Patton had changed the operational picture entirely, and he'd done it by ignoring the plan Montgomery thought was set in stone. But Palermo was just the opening act. The real prize was Messina. Both armies now raced toward it from different directions. Montgomery's route was shorter but heavily defended. Patton's was longer, but he had momentum. Montgomery assumed his direct route and superior experience would get him there first. After all, British forces had been fighting the Germans since 1940. The Americans were newcomers. Patton saw it as a horse race, and he intended to win. He pushed his troops relentlessly. Sleep was a luxury. Supply problems were ignored. When roads were blocked, he sent amphibious end runs around German positions. When divisions complained about exhaustion, he relieved commanders. 3rd Infantry Division, 2nd Armored Division, and elements of others drove toward Messina like their lives depended on arriving first, because in Patton's mind, American military credibility did depend on it. On August 16th, American patrols entered Messina's outskirts. By dawn on August 17th, the city was in American hands. Patton made sure photographers documented everything. When Montgomery's forces arrived hours later, Patton greeted him with theatrical courtesy. "It was a horse race," Monty Patton said, grinning like a shark. "Looks like we won." Montgomery's humiliation was complete. The objective he'd designed the entire campaign around had been snatched by the Americans he'd relegated to supporting roles. British newspapers tried to spin it, highlighting that Montgomery's forces had faced tougher opposition, but facts were facts. Patton had gotten there first. The pattern was established. Montgomery planned carefully. Patton moved fast. Montgomery built overwhelming force. Patton accepted calculated risks, and again Patton's methods produced results that shocked his British rival. After Sicily came Italy, then the long preparation for D-Day. Montgomery commanded all Allied ground forces for the Normandy invasion. It was his moment, his plan, his operation. The landing succeeded, but then came the grinding fight to break out from the beachhead. British and Canadian forces attacked toward Caen, a D-Day objective that was supposed to fall in hours. Weeks of brutal combat followed. Patton wasn't even in Normandy initially. He was in England, commanding a Phantom Army group as part of the deception plan to keep German forces at Calais. While Montgomery struggled to take Caen, Patton paced like a caged tiger, desperate to get into the fight. When Third Army finally became operational on August 1, 1944, Patton exploded across France. Operation Cobra had cracked the German lines, and Patton exploited the breakthrough with the same aggressive instinct he'd shown in Sicily. Third Army advanced 50 miles in 5 days, then 100 miles, then 200. Montgomery was still fighting to fully secure Caen. The contrast was devastating for British prestige. American forces under Patton liberated town after town, covered distances in days that Montgomery's forces took weeks to achieve. By late August, Paris was liberated, though not by Patton directly. The American triumph overshadowed everything Montgomery was doing in the north. Montgomery tried to explain, British forces faced tougher resistance. They were fighting the main German armored formations. American forces were exploiting through lighter defenses. All true, but the public didn't care about strategic nuance. They saw Americans racing across France while British forces crept forward. Then came the supply crisis. By September 1944, Allied logistics were stretched to breaking point. Every gallon of fuel, every artillery shell, had to be trucked hundreds of miles from Normandy beaches. There simply wasn't enough supply to support both Montgomery's northern thrust and Patton's eastern advance at full strength. Montgomery argued his 21st Army Group should receive priority. His route through Belgium toward the Ruhr was the shortest path to Germany's industrial heart. Eisenhower initially agreed. Montgomery assumed the matter was settled. Patton detonated. "Why should Monty get priority?" he demanded. "Third Army is advancing faster, taking more ground, capturing more Germans. Supply should go to whoever's winning, not whoever complains loudest." He lobbied Eisenhower relentlessly. When that didn't work completely, Patton's supply officers simply acquired fuel and ammunition meant for other units. Montgomery was outraged when he learned Third Army was getting supplies despite the priority allocation to 21st Army Group. That American bandit is stealing resources allocated to properly planned operations, Montgomery complained to his staff. But the bandit kept advancing anyway. Montgomery proposed Operation Market Garden, an airborne thrust through Holland to seize bridges over the Rhine. It was his answer to Patton's exploitation across France, a bold stroke that would demonstrate British operational capability. Montgomery expected Eisenhower to support him while reigning in Patton. Patton's counter-proposal was characteristically audacious. Give Third Army maximum supply and let me drive straight to Berlin. I can be there by Christmas. Montgomery thought Patton was insane. The idea of a single army group driving deep into Germany without securing flanks or building proper supply lines violated every principle of sound military planning. Montgomery lobbied hard against Patton's proposal, arguing for his own carefully planned Market Garden operation. Eisenhower ultimately rejected both in favor of a broad front advance. But Patton's willingness to propose such a radical alternative rattled Montgomery. The American wasn't just competing tactically, he was offering strategic alternatives that, if adopted, would make Montgomery's entire northern thrust irrelevant. Market Garden launched in September 1944 and failed catastrophically. The bridge at Arnhem couldn't be taken. British airborne forces were destroyed or captured. Montgomery's bold stroke had failed. Meanwhile, Third Army continued grinding eastward, taking city after city. Then came the Battle of the Bulge. December 16, 1944, German forces smashed through American lines in the Ardennes, creating a crisis that threatened the entire Allied position. Eisenhower called an emergency conference at Verdun on December 19. Montgomery attended, certain this was his moment to demonstrate British tactical superiority. He'd been given command of American forces north of the German penetration. He'd organize a methodical counterattack and restore the situation. Eisenhower turned to Patton. "George, how soon can you attack north to relieve Bastogne?" Every other general in the room assumed it would take at least a week. Disengaging from current operations, moving divisions 90 degrees north, coordinating a major offensive, this required time and careful planning. Montgomery expected to deliver his assessment of what was realistically possible, then watch Patton make rash promises he couldn't keep. Patton looked at Eisenhower and said, "December 22nd, 3 days." The room went silent. Montgomery stared. "That's impossible," someone said. "You can't disengage 3 divisions, turn them 90 degrees, and attack through winter conditions in 3 days. Patton smiled. "I've already drawn up contingency plans. The orders are being typed now. Third Army attacks in 72 hours. He did it, 3 entire divisions. The 4th Armored, the 26th Infantry. The 80th Infantry, disengaged from combat, pivoted north and attacked on December 22nd, exactly as Patton promised. On December 26th, 4th Armored Division broke through to relieve the surrounded 101st Airborne at Bastogne. Montgomery's careful planning looked glacial compared to Patton's lightning response. German commanders were stunned. Their intelligence had indicated such a maneuver would take weeks. Patton had done it in 3 days. The German offensive was broken on Third Army's anvil, and Patton made sure everyone knew it. Montgomery tried to claim credit for the Allied victory, giving a press conference that implied British leadership had saved the American forces. American generals were furious. Patton wanted to publicly eviscerate Montgomery, but Eisenhower ordered him to stay silent. The alliance was strained enough already, but Patton got his revenge in March 1945. Montgomery planned Operation Plunderan, elaborate set-piece crossing of the Rhine River. Weeks of preparation, massive artillery bombardments, airborne drops, overwhelming force applied with textbook precision. It was scheduled for late March, and Montgomery invited Churchill and other dignitaries to observe his carefully orchestrated triumph. On March 22nd, 3 days before Montgomery's operation, Patton quietly crossed the Rhine at Oppenheim. The Third Army got across with minimal casualties, secured a bridgehead, and expanded rapidly. Patton immediately called Eisenhower. "We're across the Rhine, without the benefit of aerial bombardment, ground smoke, artillery preparation, or airborne assistance." The dig at Montgomery was unmistakable. Everything Montgomery thought necessary for a Rhine crossing, Patton had done without. Montgomery was apoplectic. His carefully planned operation meant to demonstrate. British military prowess had been upstaged by an opportunistic crossing that made all his preparations look excessive. When Churchill heard the news, He reportedly questioned whether Montgomery's elaborate setup was necessary if Patton could just wade across. British newspapers tried to save face by emphasizing that plunder was larger and more comprehensive. But Patton had crossed first, faster, with less fanfare, and everyone knew it. The humiliations continued through war's end. Patton repeatedly advocated to Eisenhower that Montgomery be sidelined entirely, that American forces should deliver the final blows while British units held quiet sectors. Montgomery learned of this through back channels and was horrified. The suggestion that British forces after 6 years of war should step aside for Americans was insulting beyond measure. Patton also dominated the public relations battle. His ivory-handled revolvers, his profane speeches, his aggressive reputation made him a media sensation. Montgomery was famous too, but his celebrity couldn't match Patton's star power. American newspapers lionized Patton as the warrior general while portraying Montgomery as overly cautious and past his prime. What particularly galled Montgomery was that Patton achieved this fame despite the slapping incidents. Despite numerous controversies, despite having less total combat experience, Montgomery had defeated Rommel at El Alamein. He'd planned D-Day. He'd commanded in 4 major campaigns. Yet in public consciousness, Patton overshadowed him. By war's end, the statistics were undeniable. Third Army had advanced farther faster than any Allied formation. Patton's forces captured more territory, liberated more towns, and took more prisoners than Montgomery's 21st Army Group. Casualty rates per mile advanced favored Patton's aggressive methods. Montgomery had explanations. British forces faced tougher resistance. They had more difficult objectives. They were exhausted from 6 years of war. All true, but numbers don't lie. Patton's operational methods produced superior results by nearly every measurable metric. The final insult came after Germany's surrender, while Montgomery expected gratitude and recognition for British wartime contributions. Patton began advocating something that shocked everyone: continue east and fight the Soviets. Keep German units intact. Rearm them if necessary. Push Soviet forces back before they consolidated control of Eastern Europe. Montgomery thought Patton had lost his mind. The entire Allied coalition was based on Soviet cooperation. Political reality demanded friendly relations with Stalin. Yet here was Patton openly discussing military action against Britain's ally. Montgomery found himself in the bizarre position of being less hawkish than an American general. But the ultimate humiliation came decades later, after both men were dead. History sided with Patton. Military historians increasingly viewed Patton's mobile warfare as more effective than Montgomery's set-piece battles. Patton's emphasis on speed, initiative, and aggressive maneuver became standard American doctrine. His methods influenced Cold War military thinking. Meanwhile, Montgomery's reputation declined. Historians questioned Market Garden, criticized his caution, noted his difficult personality. By the 21st century, Patton had become legendary. Movies were made about him. His speeches were quoted. His tactics studied in staff colleges. Montgomery was respected for El Alamein, but not revered the way Patton was. During the war, Montgomery had dismissed Patton as a temporary nuisance, a crude American who'd be forgotten once the fighting ended. Instead, Patton became one of history's most celebrated military commanders, while Montgomery's star faded into respectability without glory. That was the cruelest twist. Montgomery thought he'd be remembered as the great Allied general of World War II. Instead, history chose the American cowboy he'd so thoroughly underestimated. 15 times Montgomery expected one thing from Patton and got something completely different. 15 times the British Field Marshal's assumptions about American capabilities, about proper military methods, about his own superiority, were shattered. The rivalry defined Allied command relationships throughout the war. Montgomery represented the old way: careful planning, overwhelming force, minimizing casualties, maintaining professional dignity. Patton represented something new: aggressive maneuver, calculated risks, prioritizing speed over safety, cultivating public image. Montgomery expected to dominate through seniority, experience, and British military tradition. The lesson was clear: in modern warfare, speed and audacity often trump careful planning. Aggressive commanders who seize opportunities defeat methodical commanders who wait for perfect conditions. And generals who understand publicity shape historical legacy as much as those who win battles. Montgomery never expected any of it. And by the time he realized what Patton was doing, it was far too late to stop him. If this deep dive into the greatest military rivalry of World War II fascinated you, then you need to subscribe to this channel immediately. We bring you the untold stories from history's greatest conflicts, the personal rivalries, the controversial decisions, and the human drama behind the battles that changed our world. Hit that notification bell so you never miss our next video. Drop a comment telling us which military rivalry we should cover next: Patton versus MacArthur, Eisenhower's command decisions, or Rommel's greatest tactical victories. Your suggestions drive our content. And if you enjoyed this video, smash that like button and share it with anyone who loves real military history. Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes the fiercest battles are fought between allies, not enemies.